So it looks like that Arthur is starting to take what Agrona said very seriously, in that he is starting to output the way that the Vritran army would. He is kind of taking that into effect and putting that towards this Vritran soldier here. And normally that's not something that Arthur would do. Arthur would be a little more calculated and a little more reserved, not acting upon these signs of what would be aggression. I don't think that he's particularly acting in aggression right now. I think he's more so. I think that Arthur is looking at what the Vritran army has to go through and their kind of hierarchy at what they have to deal with, looking at Uto as one of the retainers, whatever his position is, and looking how he treats others through his own memories whenever he was trying to absorb the mana from his horn. Kind of taking that into effect, it does kind of seem like Agrona is getting to him, but you kind of see his thoughts. It seems like he's a little different, and with this chapter, we see a few things different with Arthur in particular. He does seem to be really thinking about what Agrona said and letting it get to him just a little bit, like I had said, but I don't think it's as much, because I think he is just kind of trying to get information out of this Vritran soldier, but using it in ways that he thinks that Uto and the Vritran army are used to, because that's probably how they get the information. Although it does seem that this person in particular is willing to give a lot of information, but might be a little more on the low-ranking side. Well, as Arthur says here. With that Vritran soldier, we find that his name is actually Stefan Vale, a part of the Vale nobility within their territory. He ends up really getting tortured by Arthur. The change I'm referring to earlier kind of being that, but also, like I said, kind of feeling like it's just to get this particular information out. But after what Agrona said about no side being better than the other, I think that this is kind of what takes that hesitation away. He doesn't really feel hesitant to do this, at least to the Vritran army side. He's not going to do this to his side, obviously, because he just wants to treat the people that he is above the way that he would want to treat others anyways. It's just that you're not going to be able to get the same information out of your soldiers or their soldiers the way you would treat your soldiers. With Agrona and the Ashura both referring to Arthur in some way as being some kind of savior, that if cultivated, they can be a real threat to the enemy. And Agrona kind of confirming this a few chapters ago with him wanting to withdraw from the battle entirely. Although giving him caveats that his friends and family would be guaranteed safety, we don't really know if this is kind of a bluff to say that, hey, we're high above you. We know that you are a part of a different world. You didn't come here. This really isn't your battle kind of thing. I think that's kind of the angle he's going at. But it also could be that he actually does think that they're just way out of their league. It's going to be a blowover, and he doesn't really want to get Arthur involved, because it would be a battle that he wins, but it would be a hard-fought battle, and it's probably easier to negotiate with Arthur to have that easier win than it would be to not have the win that you would have eventually, but kind of lose all your resources as it goes through. I don't know if he has that kind of foresight. I can see why Arthur would want to take this on for himself, because he kind of can think of these more battle tactics from a more wide view. Thinking of his family, but his family isn't involved, so he kind of has this kind of outside-inside perspective, where we already saw that the Grey Sunders, one, were willing to betray them whenever they found out that the Ashuras and the Agrona army was going to be coming in the first place, before the Ashuras got involved. And now after the Ashuras got involved, we kind of see that they're kind of falling in line. But with the Ashuras being out now, because of that meeting that they had with Agrona, and them not coming to the council for any strategy meetings anymore, we can see that King Graysunder himself is kind of getting a little flustered, and you're kind of wondering, is the same kind of thing going to happen? Are we going to have this kind of treasonous event again with the Graysunders? I don't really know. After actually sending our new friend Stefan through real torture, we are finally able to not only acquire his name, which I mentioned later was Stefan Vale, part of the Vale household, but also the name of his family and information about the totems that we saw in the vision previously, crest that I believe is similar to the one put on the students to terrorize the school in a previous arc, and that they are used to a ranking system and grant power. With those ranks likely range from the bottom being the mark acquired from the awakening ceremony, and then you climb up those ranks to the crest, and then from there to the emblem, and then finally you get to that regalia stage, which I think last chapter old Stefan here was talking about surpassing his father and becoming that regalia rank. Unfortunately, Stefan is too low ranked to know a lot of this information and can't answer when Arthur asks if regalia holders are stronger than retainers, because he didn't know. Either way, not knowing too much, Arthur decides to leave it there and stop with the interrogation and just leave it to one of his lowers to execute him, because he said, hey, I'm not going to kill you. But he said, I'm not going to kill you. He didn't say anybody else was going to kill him. So he ends up dispatching him because he doesn't really know anything else, and kind of along the lines going with what the Vritran army would do to their their citizens, kind of taking Agrona what he or she had said whenever he was speaking through Elfie or Sylvie. This is when he leaves the others and goes to contemplate and thinks about telling the council about what Agrona had said. It would be a benefit in some way, but overall, I don't know how worth it really would be, because it would put a lot more restraints on Arthur. This is kind of like whenever he went and found that teleporter that was inside of one of those caves, met that one lady who ended up taking Uto's horn and giving it to him, but then ended up, mixing and mashing a bunch of different stories. It would kind of be like that, and then it would put him into question. So I think kind of leaving this out would be best for Arthur. It kind of gives him more freedom to think of things themselves and doesn't really fluster the council, because they don't have the Ashras with him, so they might think something bad of Arthur at this point. I'm not entirely sure, but that's kind of where my head is at. We leave the present and head back to Arthur's past, where last time we saw he had just won that little tournament, and he was walking down the hall alone and was snuck up on and given a cloth where it looked like it had knocked him out. It's kind of like a chloroform situation. In this chapter, we find him in a chair being tortured to find out how he won, and apparently they know something about his past that he doesn't know, leading them to think that him and the woman that accepted to train him were in cahoots the whole time and possibly rigged the match from the beginning, because I guess the other guys were so strong. So we see Gray go through this torture scene not knowing anything, but they won't listen because they already have some factual knowledge of something that would solidify it enough to want them to get that information any way possible, regardless of if he actually knows anything or not, because some of the things that they had confirmed with him, so they kind of know, if you know these two things, you know everything, which that can always be misconstrued. But they only say, just like in any of these situations, that if you're lying, you make it worse. But he could be telling the truth, and they would think that he's lying. But after enduring the white phosphorus line burning that they constantly do to his skin to get him to talk, they aren't getting anything and threaten to hit his eye next. Luckily, in that moment, the woman that agreed to train him came to save him, and he's grateful for it, obviously. Ultimately, I don't like these chapters because they don't really progress one full plot point very quickly. They kind of go along both plot points and give them equal footing, which I do like whenever chapters do that and not give that unevenness to it. But with how this one went, it seems that they're doing pretty well to keep these storylines progressing at the same time. Although it can be rough if one or both plot points end up being bad, obviously. But overall, I like this chapter and would give it an 8 out of 10. Good pacing and structure. There are 2 storylines in this chapter, and still each part progressed well in the time that was given with this chapter. Still some unanswered questions, but I'm sure they will be answered this season. I'm thinking that one of them that would be answered more likely would be if Arthur decides to stay in or stepping away from the war effort and guarantees the safety of his family. But I'm not entirely sure which one he's going to choose. As we saw in these recent chapters, that would suggest that he's gaining information and is kind of going to try and see if he wants to tell the council or not, and then we'll make his decision when it comes to that. But I'm interested in seeing what will come of this. And with that being said, I hope to see you guys in the next video. All right, see ya.